Hello, it's March 19th, 2015 at 5:35 Eastern Standard Time. This is a tarot card reading for Benjamin. Today we'll be using my Nouveau deck. I selected this deck because it's really great for readings that have legal themes, which I thought was relevant since you were in legal school and may choose to return at some point. I also selected this deck because it's the best deck I own in regards to readings that have to do with love and sexual relationships. So I thought this deck was really relevant. Today, as you selected, we'll be doing the Celtic Cross spread, and I love this spread for two different reasons. The first is the fact that it has to do with providing so much information. And the second is the fact that instead of my interpreting information you've given me and selecting a card to represent you, the tarot card deck generates the card and truly gives us insight as to who you are at this moment in time. So the first card that we pulled is that Courant card, which is right here. This card is the Seven of Wands. What this tells me is you've truly dealt with competition recently in your life, obviously reflected in your law school career and perhaps in your relationship endeavors. It sounds like you haven't put yourself out there romantically in quite some time, and part of that reason is you may feel like there's a lot of competition and you may feel like you don't measure up, which of course isn't true. Each person deserves a loving, respectful relationship just as you do. So that's what we see here. This card also advises us that in times of competition or times where you're interpreting competition and you're feeling lesser than those around you, it's truly time to turn inward and to rely on your spiritual strength. Don't search for strength in material goods, in the people around you. You have enough internal resources to get through any situation you find yourself in. The second card we pulled is the card that represents not only the situation, but whether there's going to be conflict or resolution when it comes to the situation. So here we have the Eight of Wands. And what this card tells me is your troubles in one way will be resolved. This card shows that you'll be successful, you'll find pleasure, and specifically sexual pleasure. So what this tells me is that I know you may not have been putting yourself out there on the romantic field, but of course, if you open yourself up, if you start experimenting with dating and attempt to pursue a sexual or romantic relationship, that you will find success and you will find fulfillment in doing so. The second card we pull represents, or the third card rather, after the Courant, that's the second after the Courant, that we pull is the Eight of Cups. And this represents your distant past. So this is something that happened quite some time ago but had a profound effect on you. What this card shows is that there was a relationship you took for granted, someone very close to you, someone who'd been with you for a very long time on your life's journey, and that this relationship started to dissolve. That doesn't necessarily mean that there was a large conflict, or if there was, that you were at fault. It just means that the relationship started to fall apart as these things do. Perhaps you were going in two different ways. You had no longer similar interests. And instead of letting that relationship go naturally, either you weren't aware that it was falling apart or you refused to accept that, and you truly hung on to the relationship instead of letting go and letting time and the relationship take its course. Nothing is permanent. No one will be in your life forever. Or if they are, that relationship will change. That's just part of life. And I see here that that's something you struggle with. The next card we pull represents your more recent past, and that is the Knight of Swords. And what this card tells me is that in the recent past, you were still really meditating on the dissolution of this relationship. And what this card tells me, again, as we saw in that card, the Seven of Wands that represented you, this card told us that you need to rely on your inner strength. We also see that in this card as well. The Knight of Swords really tells us that whatever your issue, whatever your conflict at this time, the only way to resolve it is through soul searching, through internal work. So already twice we've seen that the cards think you need to spend more time turning inward, learning about your inner strength, exploring your own spirituality. The next card we pulled represents your near future, and here we have the King of Pentacles. What this card tells me is if, as advised in the Eight of Wands, you put yourself out there romantically, you begin pursuing a romantic relationship, you'll find success. Again, reinforced by this card with this card. This card tells me that the people you meet, the people you begin to socialize with, will interpret you to be someone who's kind, who's generous, someone who's enjoyable to be around, and a definite possibility in a romantic relationship. The next card we pulled represents the present. And here we have the High Priestess. It's a really interesting card in this spread because, like the other cards we just mentioned, what this card really represents is internal work. So what this card is telling me is you do need to begin working on, your own strength, your own spirituality. You need to begin trusting your gut. What this card also tells me is if you do open yourself up to a romantic relationship, the person you end up with will have a very strong feminine spirit. Whether you date women or not, the person you end up dating with will be a very feminine, a strong feminine personality. Now, the next card represents what friends, family, any outside forces think of your situation. And here we have the King of Wands. It's a great card. What this card basically tells me is that the people around you think you have a strong personality, a dominant personality. You're definitely not someone who blends in, but you're still a relaxed, welcoming, kind person. So all the good impressions we saw here in the King of Pentacles are really reinforced with this card. The next card we have basically represents what you at your deepest, most internal level feel about the situation, feel about where you are now. And what we have here is the King of Swords. And what this card shows me is you're someone who really values fairness. You really value the idea that everyone is equal, everyone deserves an opportunity. Which is interesting when we compare this card, the Seven of Wands, which showed that you were feeling pressure from competition, maybe in an academic and a romantic setting. So what this card tells me, what the King of Swords tells me, is that at your deepest, you know that you deserve an equal chance, that when you see other people pursuing their dreams, achieving their dreams, you feel in desire at your deepest for that success. You feel you deserve it, and you feel that you very much want it. The next card represents hopes and fears that maybe you're more aware of, whereas the King of Swords, this position is more about the internal, maybe something you weren't aware of or something you didn't want to accept. And here we have the Wheel. And what this shows me is that right now, you're obviously very concerned with succeeding. This reading so far has really dealt with romantic love. So what this card tells me is obviously your goal right now is you would love to be in a romantic relationship. And if we see the undertones of the competition, maybe of law school represented here, you would love to